All right, continuing our discussion of date time in this video, all we're going to be doing is turning this sort of unfriendly, not very human readable output that we get from our sort of little doctor's appointment code here. We're getting this 2021 0605 14 15 51. Obviously that's in 24-hour time. Sometimes people say that's military time. 14:15 is 2:15 p.m. And so we don't want to show that to a user or a patient. We want something that's very readable. So we're going to create this friendly version. And in order to create a friendly version, we have to use something called string format time, which is a method of the datetime library. And we can look up information about datetime by going to the documentation, just like we can for most stuff in our code. Again, the datetime, like a lot of documentation, the datetime library has a pretty intimidating amount of stuff in it. The reason that it's so robust is because it's such an important part of programs. Like I said, date and time are critical parts of every program that runs Python. So there's a lot to digest here if you have to. However, we don't really need a lot of this information right now. In fact, a lot of programmers don't need all this information. The thing that we're most interested in is the string format time and string parse time methods. We're only going to talk about string format time in this video, and we can find it by looking at the table of contents here. And what you can see when we go to string format time is that there are a bunch of format codes. And these behave just like string formatting codes like %s, %d for integers, %f for floats. These behave in a very similar manner. And so we're going to take advantage of these in our code to output a nice human readable string. Now, don't be overwhelmed by all these codes. You don't need to know all of them. In fact, you don't need to know any of them, really. You can always look them up. If you are interested in taking your MTA certification next year in Python, then you will have to know the top 4 or 5, which you're going to see some examples right now of those, but you definitely don't need to know all of them, so don't stress about knowing all these. You can always just Google them. Okay, back to our code. So we're going to take 30 days from now. That's our date time object, and then we're going to call the string format time method on that datetime object. Now we'll input our formatting codes. Now keep in mind that you can write anything, including like commas, you could put colons, you could put a whole string in here and then include the date stuff afterwards. I like to create a date string and then build a string around it. It just makes it clearer to me what's happening. So that's going to be my date string. And then after I've completed that, then I'm going to print out a longer string which includes this friendly date string. And as you can see, once I've done all of that, I've got an F string there. I have successfully printed out a string that says your appointment is Saturday, June 5th, 2021, which is pretty much exactly what we're going for here. So this is all pretty straightforward. Datetime's not too complicated to use until you get into really fancy like parsing of complicated looking dates. We'll look at parsing later, but a simple example that I'll go ahead and give you for string parse time, like why you would use that, is you've certainly had a situation where someone has texted you like a day or they've sent you a day and a time for some kind of appointment or thing that they want to do. And typically what will happen in your text is that string or that text will be underlined, and you can tap it on your phone and it will go to your calendar and let you create a calendar appointment. It's a great example of how string parse time or similar methods in other languages, that's how they work basically, is they take some plain string and they parse out the date and time data, and then we can use that data in a calendar or something else where you can't just throw a string into a calendar and expect it to understand what a date is. So that's a good example of like how string parse time is used, which is the other method you're seeing here, and we'll talk more about that later.